Eric, welcome to the podcast. Good to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm excited for this conversation. Obviously, you made a big impact on the whole startup community. Businesses back what 11 years ago. It was 11 years ago now, I think.
Yeah, it's been a
When
few
we,
years.
yeah. So you're back here, obviously, launching a new book, which I'm excited to talk about today. So again, welcome. Glad to have you on the podcast.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, it's been quite a run, quite a ride the last 15 years or so.
When you, I'm assuming you've done this at some points. Maybe it's laying up sleepless nights or whatever. When you look back 11 years, did you think your first book or the Lean Startup would have the effect that it did? Like, did you know that going into the launch or?
Gosh, I wish I'd known. Yeah, I mean, although maybe it's better that I didn't know. I was pretty naive about the whole thing. I got a very like insular career before that. I was an engineer, a software guy in an era where startups and startup founders were not very public. So it
Mhm.
wasn't like it is now where everyone is like desperate for attention and you can't get tech people to shut up. Like now it's very different. But in those days, it was considered like a little bit unseemly for the CEO, CTO, kind of key people in a company to be spending too much time on self promotion. You're supposed to be heads down building your company. So
Yeah.
it was all very unexpected to me. And I knew that I was onto something because, from the beginning, the blog and the kind of work that I did with startups, it was very controversial.
Hmm.
Now Lean Startup has kind of taken over the world, but in those days it was really very controversial. People would get very angry at me. But as a result, like there was always stuff to talk about. People came to my talks. It was very live. And when we did the first Lean Startup conferences, it felt like a religious revival. Like it just had this incredible energy as people felt like
Yeah.
we were going to go change the world in this really profound way, as we had like found something that we were excited about. And we were kind of sick and tired of the so-called best practices about company building.
Hmm.
But I hoped it would cross over into some level of mainstream success, but I had no idea. I was not even remotely prepared for what happened next.
Hmm. So then tell me about because I'm really interested actually the new book Incorruptible. Where's the title come from? Give me the background of like the title ideation.
Sure. This is the first book I've ever written where I didn't know the title most of the way through. I actually was struggling with what the book should be called because we don't even have a name for the thing I'm trying to write about. That's what I realized, maybe
Hmm.
halfway through after working on the book for several years. I'm trying to help people understand this thing that happens. We build these incredible companies and then they lose the spark that made them special. I tell a story in the book of a friend of mine who had been an entrepreneur for like 10 or 15 years, had built this incredibly successful company, had made more money for his investors than they could ever need in 5 lifetimes. I mean, it was just an incredible success story. And I was going to an event to, talk about his career and life. And, people were coming from all over the country. Even people he had like fired
Oh
came for
wow.
this event to celebrate him.
Yeah.
And I was on the phone talking to a new founder, just starting out their company. And I was like, look, I hear I can probably help you. I know that they were like very worried about the things that could happen to their company. What's the future they're going to look like? So look, I'm sure I can help you, but I got to go to this event. I'm explaining I have to go. The people will be fired. And the guy's like, oh man, respect. That's just the kind of company I want to build one day. And I was like, man, you're not listening to me. You don't understand. He doesn't work there anymore. This is not a party. This is a wake.
Hmm.
And he's like, awake? Did somebody die? I was like, no, nobody died. He's like, is the company bankrupt? No, the company's doing fine. But nobody can believe anything this company says anymore because the second the stock price took a dip, the CEO who had built this whole thing from nothing was ousted. And now we don't know what the company stands for anymore. And
Hmm.
he was like, oh my God, are you telling me that's going to be me someday? I'm like, yeah, unless you do things very differently than the supposed best practices, you're on a one-way ticket to this outcome. And we all have experienced this outcome of a company that betrays what it once stood for. How many times have you had that experience? You go to a restaurant, you take one bite of the food, and you're like, did private equity buy this restaurant?
Right.
You
Right.
can taste private equity in the food. That's how common the problem is.
Yeah.
It's all over our economy. And I realized that this thing that happens to companies where they lose what made them special, or they get weak and bureaucratic and lame and just some of them even like malignant.
Hmm.
What do you call it? Mission drift? Like it sounds like a
Hmm.
navigation error.
Yeah.
Bureaucracy sounds like paperwork. Like what is it? And then I realized like our grandparents, our great grandparents would have had no trouble with this. They would have said, oh, that's corruption. That's
Yeah.
what you're talking about, like a corrosion that's rusting the metal bolts that's holding the whole thing up.
Yeah.
And then no wonder we see these institutions collapse in such spectacular fashion. So that's when I conceived the idea that we should call that fall from grace corruption. And therefore, the project for all of us who care about the quality of the organizations we work in and live in all every day, we should be trying to build them as incorruptible
Hmm.
institutions.
I love that. All right. We're going to get in that a little deeper, but we do have a tradition. We got to do the rapid fire. We'll warm up the vocals here a little bit more. All right.
I'm ready. I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right. Here we go. What's the most humbling setback you faced as a founder?
I'm spoiled for choice. Yeah, because the first startup I ever built ended in humiliating failure, and I thought I was on track again. I'll tell you this story. This was really, really hard. I built something called the Long-Term Stock Exchange, which I say I built it, but I don't run it anymore. It's now a going concern. One of the iconic stock exchanges now in the United States, same regulatory category as New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ. But when I conceived of it, it's actually I wrote about it in the Lean Startup. Like, somebody should really do this. I didn't think it was going to have to be me. What do I know about financial services? I was like, oh God, it was a really difficult project. I've worked on it for more than 10 years and took an incredible team to get it up and running, because this is not the kind of thing anyone's ever done before. Not really since the creation of NASDAQ 50 years ago, as someone tried to create a new listings venue for public equities with its own new listing standards. Anyway, I'd always wondered, why are all the stock exchanges in the world the same? I just assume whenever we see something in the economy, just like everybody else, I assume, it's because of competition. Darwinian natural selection. If every company's doing something, that must be because that something is good. But I found out the hard way that that's not why everything is the same. And I'll make a long story short. We were just about to get the first version of LTSE approved by the government. Like, we finally had our application in, everything was about to be set. And we get these set of calls from like people who did not want to see us succeed. And they were like, look, it's not just that we're going to stop the government from approving your application. We're going to put pressure on all your vendors, all your partners, to make sure that you don't get approved. They're going to withdraw your application. They're going to withdraw the critical services that you need. And I was like, man, why? Like, what are you talking about? This is America. You can't do this. Like, we're going to have competition. They're like, well, we don't like the thing. We don't think it's going to be good. They had all these reasons why they didn't like it, but mostly because it deviated from the best practices. They're like the defenders of these practices. I said, well, why don't we, if it's such a bad idea, why don't you just let us fail? Like, why do you want to, what's so important to you about preventing it from even being attempted? But I couldn't reason with them. Anyway, I thought they were bluffing, but they were not. They came after our vendors and everything. And it all came to a head when it was this story. I remember this very vividly. It was the middle of the night because I was in Europe. I was not even in the right time zone. And they kind of attacked us right when we were separated and fragmented. My team wasn't even together. So I'm like getting everyone on Zoom. It's the middle of the night. And I said, listen, team, they finally made it clear to me what we have to do. They called and they said, if you'll just make your listing standards the same as everyone else, all this difficulty can be made to go away. And I really felt bad for my team that people had given up huge pay cuts to do this with me because they thought it was the right thing to do. And I said, look, I'm not going to tell you what to do here. If you guys want to capitulate and compromise, I understand. Because at least then you'd have like a huge feather in your cap. We could, live to fight another day or whatever. Right. And I'll never forget everyone on the team, everyone on my team at that time, everyone around the circle, everyone just said, no deal. We'd rather go bankrupt than betray what we set out to do. And I joke in the book that like, I wish I could tell you it was my visionary leadership that got us through that awful night. But the truth is I was the one curled up on the bathroom floor. I thought we had basically failed. Like, I had invested years of my life into this thing and we were going bankrupt. I couldn't imagine that actually turned out to be one of the best things that ever happened to us. But in the moment, it was so humiliating. Yeah. And when I tell that story, people who've never been around entrepreneurship often are like, what was the big deal, man? Okay, so your company was like, why were you curled up on the bathroom? It seems like very, very extreme. But man, I tell it to other entrepreneurs. They're like, oh yeah, we've all been there. Because you can't help it. You think you are your company. Yeah. And so if it's going to die, you think you're going to die. It was terrible.
What's the one that I want to get off, obviously go to the next question, but like when you say like there was parameters they wanted you, now I was researching a little before, but give it a little more detail. Like, what's something that we don't know about with NASDAQ or some of these others that they were trying to prevent. Like they
Oh
thought.
yeah, yeah. It wasn't. Ironically, it wasn't Nasdaq and NYSE that was doing this attack. They weren't even involved, so far as I know. What's happening is we live in the era of what's called shareholder primacy, and it has a whole bunch of dogmas that are like this is the best way to run companies. And one of those ideas that we ran afoul of in this case is what's called shareholder democracy, meaning one share, one vote. So
Mhm.
the idea is that if you borrow a bunch of money and you buy a bunch of shares in a company the day before it's having a big shareholder vote, you basically get to vote those shares. So if you want to just control what a company does, as long as you're rich enough, you should be allowed to do so. The research shows this is a pretty bad idea. So we had proposed a different voting system, one where the number of votes you get is proportional to how long you've been an investor in the company. So the long-term investors are advantaged over the short-term investors. I think this idea is very straightforward, very simple, like very logical. Everyone understands it, but it violates this best practice, and people went crazy trying to prevent it from ever being tried.
Hmm. Okay, I get that. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's because like if money controls it, it's sort of like the government and voting. Like you can kind of you throw a bunch of money and maybe have more influence than someone else. I guess that's probably what they're preventing.
We could get into the psychology of what motivates people to be loyal to these best practices, but
True.
I think the evidence shows that they're value destroying, so we should replace them.
Yeah. All right. How do you decide what's a priority when everything feels urgent?
I struggle with this a lot. My inbox is a disaster zone every day of just a thousand competing priorities. And look, I want to be honest. Like I have a huge team that supports me, so I have a lot of people that I can rely on to help me sort through,
Yeah.
all the stuff. But I I only realize how overwhelming it is when I see it through their eyes.
Hmm.
So like I've gotten used to it. A friend of mine calls it the productivity tornado. It's not so much like a rational, prioritized like to-do list. It's just like all these incredible opportunities swirl around, and I try to keep people working together and as knowledge, let each person know what the other people are what's going on as best I can as they collide into each other. But what happens is because I don't try to rigidly control everything, a lot of serendipity comes my way.
Hmm.
People who wouldn't otherwise have met get excited about teaming up on something. I have a real open source ethos, so I try very much to bring other people in and let them prosper and thrive from the
Hmm.
work I do. That kind of stuff. Sorry, guess I'm not on Do Not Disturb here. One sec. But for me, even as I delegate as much as I can, and even as I try to figure out what's most important, like that, I still have an overwhelming number of things to do on any given day. And I
Yeah.
found that trying to be quiet and just let the thing that is most important like emerge on its
Hmm.
own is more valuable than doing like a very seemingly organized top down analysis, because I can analyze my way in circles.
Hmm.
But I
I
think
see.
the really important things tend to stick with you in an inner way, and then they come to your attention when the time's right.
Okay. They'll bubble up the top as you're saying almost naturally.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, I think most of the time when I'm looking at my inbox, the problem with our digital systems is they're distracting. So I'll often, like, if I have a quiet moment, I'll be like, you know what I need to do? I need to email this person I haven't talked to in a couple of years. I think they're going to really be helpful to me.
Yeah.
It's actually really difficult to survive that insight long enough to get to the composition window in my email.
Yeah.
Because on my way in, as I turn on my device, whatever it is, I get bombarded with notifications. Then when I open my email, it doesn't take me to the compose screen. It takes me to the inbox. Well, now there's 42 things there. So like I
Yeah.
feel
Yeah.
it's kind of like a minefield. I have to run through the minefield to hopefully remember the thing I was planning to do when I started to do the work task. Our future digital systems, I hope, will be a lot better than that.
Yeah, that's a good point. What's the most valuable KPI you track and why?
Well, a lot of this book is about how to track trustworthiness
Hmm.
as an asset. So KPIs actually in most organizations are the enemy of trustworthiness, because we only track the things that are easy to measure, and the things that are easy to measure are the things that get prioritized by ROI, stack rank.
Hmm.
And no, and trustworthiness is very difficult. So the things that you need to do, like you have to have a reputation for doing the right thing, even when you don't have to. That's the
Hmm.
only way for people to trust you. And so such actions tend to stack rank negative by ROI. So a big part of the book is how do we nonetheless prioritize them in our KPI system, even though under conventional measurements, they stack rank as negative.
Hmm.
So it's the
Interesting.
bottom.
Okay. So, but is there anything like you personally track like yourself just to maybe
Oh,
stay?
me personally?
Yeah.
No, I
Or
don't.
just,
I don't run my life on KPIs. I mean, obviously, in the different businesses that I have,
yeah.
they use various forms of KPIs and metrics, but they're all unique to that specific business. I'm not
Okay.
focused on like email signups or followers or
Okay.
book
Okay.
sales
All
or
right.
anything like that as my key. Like, unless I'm launching a book, so because I'm very focused on like getting pre-orders for the book,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. But then they tend to be temporary.
Mhm.
Otherwise, I feel like it ruins your life. You spend all your time becoming obsessed with that one metric.
Yeah. That's a good point because if you focus on one, then you might miss out on the 10 others that end up
Yeah,
being,
yeah, yeah.
again, for that long term view. All right. You can only use one tool for your business. What's your go to?
Well, that's cheating now because now you could just use Claude Code and Claude Code can do everything. So now, yeah, you have every. It's like what? Well, I got a Swiss Army knife with every other tool in it. So yeah, definitely, I'm definitely taking Claude Code with me. Well, actually, to be fair, I would take, at Answer AI, which is an AI research lab that I helped start. We have a tool we call Solve It, which is I think actually a much more effective tool. So I guess if I could only take one, I'm taking Solve It, but that's not as well known. Claude Code probably is the one that your listeners will be more likely to have heard of.
Well, give the pitch on that. Give me the 30 seconds on this. What is
Oh,
this?
yeah, yeah. So most people are busy trying to use LLMs to replace humans.
Mhm.
You can just see it in these CEOs that are like practically gasping with pleasure at the thought of laying off half their team.
Mhm.
Um, and I get it. They think that AI is primarily going to be used for cost reduction. But the problem is that cost reduction, people who get promoted and rewarded for cost reduction often are not held accountable for the brand and other consequences, the quality consequences, the customer consequences of those costs that get cut. So I think the same thing's going to happen here. Instead, I'm really interested in AI that can be used as an amplifier or an augmenter of human creativity. And
Mhm.
that's really what the Solve It platform is an answer to.
Hmm. Cool. All right. When was the last time you wanted to give up but didn't?
Five times a week, probably. I can't. Oh my God. I've
Here
had
today? Yeah.
writing this book was one of the hardest things I've ever attempted. Obviously, LTSE was super hard. So I've had many, many, many opportunities to give up. And I definitely I had a lot of long nights where I just was like, am I really making any progress here? What am I even doing? And the other thing I really felt acutely is, launching anything is extremely difficult in this day and age. We've become so celebrity obsessed. So in some ways, it's been harder to launch this book despite my huge platform and hundreds of thousands of followers. I
Yeah.
actually am finding it more difficult than when I was an absolute nobody 15 years ago. It was much easier to get the word out because like when people followed you on a social media platform, they saw all your posts.
Right.
Now nobody sees any of your posts unless you conform to what the algorithm wants you to say.
Right.
And now media platforms are intensely celebrity sensitive. So the number one question everyone wants to know is like, are you more famous than me? And like, I definitely had some moments when I first started, when the book was done, I was like, oh, finally done with this book. I can relax. I'm like, oh no, I can't relax. I have to now enter into this publicity phase of things.
Yeah.
And I definitely had some moments of like, I'm definitely ready to give up. This is terrible. Like, I can't believe people voluntarily spend all their time on Instagram and all these platforms. They're horrible. They're terrible for your mental health.
Hmm.
And at least for me, like, it's been very difficult to maintain my sense of self
Hmm.
in this very celebrity dominated world. So yeah, plenty of times I wanted to give up.
When did like ink on paper, or maybe it was text, on I, whatever, a message or something, like when did you first come up with this idea or say this is going to be a book?
Oh, for this book,
Yeah.
gosh, it would have been 3 years ago, I think, or longer. I'd had it in the back of my mind that I was going to need to do something because what was happening was the privilege of my life being the lean startup guy is
Mhm.
people come to me all the time for leadership advice. Every day, practically, someone wants my help raising money, starting a company, transforming a company, dealing with their board, investors, whatever. It's really fun, and as a result, I get to try stuff. If I have an idea, I get to put it into practice. So for a long time, I've been trying to help people build companies that are mission driven, that are more long term in nature,
Mhm.
that take their fiduciary duties to customers and to employees as seriously as for investors. And a lot of those meetings, I noticed after a while, a lot of those meetings started to end the same way. People would be like, oh, this is great. I'm going to go try to get this. I'm going to go try to do the things you're advising.
Mhm.
I need to talk to my co-founder. I need to talk to my lawyer. I need to talk to my investor. I need to go talk to some people. Is there anything that I can read to learn more? And I'd be like, oh yeah, tons. I've got like hundreds of academic papers that prove these various points. And they'd be like, what else you got?
Yeah,
Like,
right.
okay, well, there's these great books that like profile certain companies. There's these pretty cool case study companies. And they'd be like, okay, what else? And I'd be like, a lot of people have written manifestos about why this is a problem. And they'd be like, yeah, but I need the book for this.
Yeah,
And you don't want to admit that no one's written that book because it makes you sound like a lunatic.
yeah,
You don't want to be like, no, there's nothing you can read. I was like, okay. So when that happened the first time, I was like, whatever, I just need to go find the right book. And I tried recommending like dozens of books in this space. I mean, there are a lot of good books that have been written that I feel like this book draws on, but none of them was really getting the job done. And so I finally was like, okay, I guess I'm going to have to do this. And, and I have a publisher already and I've done this before. So I called my literary agent. I was like, okay, I think it's time to
yeah.
embark on another project. That's how it started.
Yeah, that's cool. I'll ask just because you were talking about the publicity side of things. When did you finish the book versus obviously the launch date? Like, was that a long span of time between?
Yeah, the book was basically finished in January, the bulk of it earlier
Mhm.
this year. So that was, whatever, 4 or 5 months ago. But like it's never really done until it gets transmitted to the printer.
Yeah,
And I was one of those authors. I was making changes and edits like right up until the deadline, until it was very, very, very done.
yeah,
And even when I read the audiobook, I was making changes for the audio edition because I was like, oh, this isn't quite right. Or I'm very finicky. I wanted to get it exactly right. So yeah, it's my poor kids. I went through all these deadlines, and my kids would be like, "Oh, is the book?" I'd be like, "I just have to finish this deadline, and the book will be done." They'd be like, "Is it done?" I'd be like, "Well, that draft was done," and they kept being like, "Wait a minute, I thought you said it was going to be done." I'm like, "Well, it is. It's mostly done, but then there's an extra thing, and there's another thing." So it was a lengthy process.
Mm. Well, I want to go back because you were obviously talking about the book Incorruptible, and you mentioned something. I want to pull on this. I'm not sure if this is the right direction or not, but you talked about our grandparents. And it's weird. When I think about that, and I remember I actually interviewed my great uncle. He actually just passed away. He was 102,
Oh my condolences.
103 maybe. And I remember just asking him about like the good old days, like the 1920s, 1930s, all this stuff. Anyways, the reason I say this is like when you think of like corruption, it seemed like back in those days that it was kind of out of sight, out of mind. We didn't know anything. Obviously, I wasn't alive then, right? I was born in the 80s. But like, even when I was a kid, like heard stuff on the news, but like you didn't really see anything because obviously the internet wasn't around. Do you feel like now, like this is sort of when we think of the word corruption or what you're trying to accomplish with the book, it's because it's so in our face. We see it all day, every day. You can listen to YouTube videos and podcasts and all that about all of these ways that maybe companies aren't performing ethically or the way they should or anything? Like I'm just kind of curious if that's
Yeah,
maybe
yeah, that definitely helps. I think the way I structured the book, it's to me, it's not even really a business book. It's more like a mystery, a double mystery.
Mm,
The first mystery is like, why has this been going on for such a long time? And it is definitely getting worse. Like, the average longevity of companies is going down. Like the average holding period of stocks is going down. The average tenure of leaders is going down. You can see the symptoms of an economy with a disease. Like there's an illness. And yeah, it was bad before, but it's worse now for sure. And many of these corrupt acts, they're value destroying. So you say, well, why would investors want to kill the golden goose? It doesn't really make sense. So that's mystery number one, is like, why, if capitalism is supposed to be about competition and value creation, why do we see these value destroying activities all the time? But the second mystery is, if you ask most people, like, why, think about like a favorite brand that got ruined, or, some kind of company that betrayed you that used to be great. Now it sucks. If you ask people, why did that happen? They'll generally be like, well, that's inevitable. That's basically what happens when you have a lot of money involved, or when companies go public, or where people are greedy. And, they have some just so story about why there's nothing you can do. But then if you ask them, like, do you have any companies that that you really like? They'll be like, oh yeah, I love Costco.
yeah.
Like, but I thought you said it was inevitable that when companies get big, Costco's worth $400 billion. I thought you said it was inevitable when companies go public, but Costco's a public company. You said it was inevitable when companies get old, but Costco's 40 years old now. You said it was impossible when their leadership changes, but Costco's been through 3 or 4 CEOs now. How come there are these exceptions? And Costco's not alone. There's dozens of these companies that just are quietly breaking all the rules. They're like these quiet outliers. So that's a double mystery, is if it's inevitable, Why are there exceptions?
Hmm. Yeah.
And what's interesting to me, both helping people build these exceptional companies and studying them, is the extent to which they violate every single one of the supposed best practices we teach people about how companies should be built, structured, and governed. And so as a result, I think part of the issue is the internet and media. Like we're more aware of corruption than we were before.
Mhm.
But I think also there's more of it going on. Many ways of making money in today's economy, our grandparents would have seen not just as morally dubious, they would have been crimes.
Hmm.
They would have been illegal. Stock buybacks were illegal until the mid 80s.
Yeah.
In the 19th century, get this, if you were the richest man in America, and you decided, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to borrow a bunch of money from my friends and take over some company so I can redirect its purpose. That kind of thing happens all the time these days.
Hmm.
If you tried that in the 19th century, first of all, boards would not have felt in any way obligated to take your money. They could tell you to get lost, which today that's not possible. That's illegal. But in those days, it would have been seen as very obvious that a board should try to resist this kind of takeover.
Mhm.
But let's say you did do it. Let's say you took over a company that, makes a railroad or a canal or whatever, has some beneficial purpose. And you decided to try to convert it into a company whose purpose was just to make money for you and your shareholders. That would have been seen as a crime. The courts would void your charter. You would get the corporate death penalty for doing that.
Hmm.
So these norms change over time, and we have changed them in a very deliberate, very self-destructive way. And that's why we're seeing these behaviors left, right, and center. We have glorified them, legalized them, and we give them our social sanction,
Hmm.
as well as making people incredibly rich by doing them. So yeah, I think we have a job to do, a job to say enough of this.
Hmm. When you say value destroying activity, and you could take the positive if you want, maybe what's the Costco's in them doing, but I'm kind of curious, what's a few bullet points of those value destroying activities or the positive side of like value creating maybe activities or
Since I mentioned Costco, can I tell you a story?
oh,
Let
absolutely.
me illustrate with a story. Maybe it's easier than to do it theoretically. So let me tell you the legend of Saul Price. This is like the deep cut history of Costco, okay? Before there was Costco. Saul was the father of modern retail. He was a lawyer in the 1950s who decided to become an entrepreneur late in his career. And when he was a lawyer, he saw himself, he was trained that he had a fiduciary duty to his client, meaning I have to put the client's interest before my own.
Hmm.
So when he became a retailer, he asked himself a simple question: who's my client? To him, it was very obvious that the customer is the client. He had a fiduciary duty to the customer. And so, for example, in the early days of the company he built, which was called FedMart, when competitors would try the loss leader strategy on him, meaning they would sell products he was selling at below their own cost to try to drive him out of business,
Hmm.
he would put up signs inside his own store telling his customers, don't buy this product from me. You can get it cheaper down the street.
Hmm.
He would cap his own margins. He wouldn't mark up any item more than 14%. He had a real sense of ethics. He had an ethos, a business philosophy that made sure that the only way FedMart could make money was by achieving this mission of serving its customers. So that was so successful that he took the company public. But as a public company, he felt this gravitational pressure. He believed in low prices and high wages, but the markets always reward high prices and low wages. So he felt like he was always under pressure to betray these commitments. He arranged with a new set of shareholders to take the company private, to sort of avoid this mess. But the new board was just as captured by these gravitational forces as the public market investors they replaced. And they always wanted, higher prices, lower wages.
Yeah.
Everything came to a head one day in 1975 when Saul came into work one day and he found out that he doesn't work there anymore. How did he find out?
Hmm.
He couldn't get into his own office because the locks had been changed. Okay. So the investors got what they wanted. They got Saul out of the way and they were able to really like convert FedMart into these best practices: faster growth, higher prices, lower wages, best practices. Within 7 years, the new investors had driven FedMart into bankruptcy.
Wow.
And what's strange about this story is they did it in the name of profit. So they were destroying the engine that made FedMart work, even while they were telling themselves they were maximizing shareholder value.
Yeah.
Saul, though, was not the kind of entrepreneur who would just give up. even though he found this whole situation humiliating. He took 2 weeks off, 2 weeks, and then he was back at work. He leased the office upstairs from FedMart and started a new company, which he called Price Club. But the reason why most people today have never heard of Price Club, despite Saul's incredible prominence, is because we know it by a different name. One of the people that left FedMart to go to Price Club with Saul was a guy named Jim Sinegal. He had worked his way up from stock boy to executive at FedMart. He quit in protest of Saul's betrayal. He went to work for Saul at Price Club, and a few years after that, he started his own company, which we know today as Costco. In fact, today's Costco is actually the merger of the two companies, his and Saul's, that they called Price Costco, which we just call Costco now. And that gives you kind of like, if you want like a rule of thumb, a shorthand for how to do this, we need the ethos of Saul Price. Saul had the ability to build a company that people could trust, but he didn't have the tools to protect it from outside pressure. So we need the ethos of Saul, but we need the integrity of Costco. See, Jim Sinegal understood that this was going to happen to Costco unless he intervened. So he built what I call a governance fortress around Costco that prevents outsiders from meddling in their affairs, prevents what happened to FedMart from happening to them. Now, this is not anti-investor. Investors have made an incredible amount of money. Costco is one of the best performing stocks in the whole S&P since it went public in 1986 or 87, whatever year that was. So Costco's done really, really well for its investors, but only because investors have only limited influence.
Is that based on how, like, I guess I'm trying to think of the best words, like the articles of the business and how they structure, like how can they, is that based on that? So
yeah. This goes by the very anodyne sounding term governance, which when people hear the word governance, they're like, oh no, so boring, right? Like we're not talking about building permits and end user license agreements. No, governance is the most like primordial act in organizational design. It is, I call it the art of organizational soulcraft. We're talking about the Constitution, the founding documents, the legal structures that make organizations either strong or weak. And unfortunately, today, our best practices are almost guaranteed to make an organization weak instead of strong. But if we study, if we understand, in the book, I call it the new governance, we can make governance not only less boring, I promise, but also a source of strength to protect the mission rather than betray it.
Yeah, well, I just experienced, my wife's been talking about Costco for like 2 years. I finally went for the first time like 6 weeks ago, fell in love with it, to probably what the stories you have in there and the $1.50 hot dog and the whole thing. But like just it's so funny with these businesses. It's like the little stuff. Like one of the things with Costco, I don't know if you get to go there or not, but like you have like a double wide parking lot, like there's 2 lines. I don't know if everyone's like this, but the couple I've been to, like things like that, where like you're thinking about the customer experience.
There's so many little things like that. It's ridiculous. And yeah, the $1.50 hot dog is of course very famous because, very famously, the Costco COO at the time went to Jim Sinegal when he was still CEO and said, look, boss, we're getting killed on this hot dog. We're losing money on it. We need to raise the price. And Jim Sinegal, his quote is so famous, you can now get a t-shirt that has this quote on it. He said, if you effing raise the price of the hot dog, I will kill you. Figure it out. And the figure it out is the thing I want to really harp on, because there's all these little things that Costco does that they don't have to do, that treat their members right, that treat their employees right. I tell a bunch of the stories in the book. During the Great Recession in 2008, they gave their employees a raise and they did it quickly rather than slowly, even though that cost them an extra $20 million. But just to focus on the hot dog for a second, most people don't really understand how big Costco is. Because like 400 billion, you're like, well, how big is that? It sounds like a lot, but is it like, it's really very big. To give you a sense of scale, Costco sells more hot dogs in its food court. I'm talking about the cooked hot dogs they sell in the food court for $1.50. They sell more hot dogs in a year than every Major League Baseball stadium put together.
Wow.
More than 200 million of these hot dog soda combos. So think how much money they could make if they added $1 to the combo price. It would be free money straight to the bottom line. If it wasn't for the fact that a $1.50 hot dog was so famous, no one would even notice. Yeah. But the thing I think is interesting about this story is nobody ever asks the most important question when they hear it for the first time. They ask questions like, wait, is the hot dog a loss leader? No, by the way. They vertically integrated their hot dog supply chain to avoid having to raised the price. They played all kinds of shenanigans with their soda vendors and played Pepsi and Coke off each other to get the lowest possible price. No, the most important part of the story is, why did the COO suggest raising the price in the first place? We don't even ask that question because, of course, he did. We've all been taught that the best practice in business is you raise prices whenever you can get away with it. Jim Sinegal actually very famously said that he'd done the calculation. He said that if they raised the price of ketchup by 3%, no one would notice. They would have no change in number of sales. And if they did that across the board to every product in the store, they would literally double their net income.
Wow.
So why don't they do it? He said it's the business equivalent of taking heroin. Once you do it once, it becomes baked into your future forecasts.
Yeah.
You do it once and you have a gangbuster quarter, but now the street expects that is the new baseline going forward. The next quarter has to be even better. And it will be only a matter of time before someone says, listen, if 3% worked, why don't we try 6%? Mm-hmm. And what are you going to do? So you have to hold the line. You have to be willing to do the little things throughout the company and its supply chain that actually create that experience for customers of that magic, but most importantly, that trustworthy feeling.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know why it came to mind, just because my son and I were talking about this. I have a teenager, about Chick-fil-A. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you'd put that in a similar light as Costco, but like at least the customer experience, even like having the sliding door where you can walk out on the drive-through, and obviously the closed on Sundays is a big thing, right? Because they can easily justify, well, we're going to open one Sunday.
Of course, it's so easy to talk yourself into it. Absolutely. Right. And that's true for anything that makes a company distinctive.
Yeah. Yeah. So when you think about, and maybe this is a, lean startup to where we're at today kind of thing, but when you're talking with founders, like people that are building companies, they're having some success, the momentum's there. How do they not become corrupt? Like, how do they not get to the...
You have to go into this with eyes open. Corruption is not inevitable, but if you just lazily follow the defaults that people lay out for you, it will happen to you. I tell a story in the book of a founder who came to me prepping for his IPO. It was a high-flying, super hot company, multi-billion-dollar valuation, it's going great. And I walked him through everything I'm walking you through on this podcast. We had a really deep conversation about all these problems, weaknesses, mistakes. And at the end, he was like, okay, I really need to take this seriously. I need to make sure I get it right. But a few months later, he called me back and he was like, look, thanks for your offer to help, but no thanks. I got it covered. I said, oh yeah, what's the plan? He said, well, I talked to my bankers, my lawyers, my CFO, my GC, my investors, my growth investor. I talked to all these experts. And they all said the same thing. They said, man, Eric is such a downer. If he really believed in your business, if he really saw how unique and special you are, the vision that you have, he would know you're the exception to all these rules. So he's like, okay, thanks, bye. And I remember being like, listen, good luck. I hope that's true. Now, according to Harvard Law School, they have a data set there where they track outcomes for founders. They found that among venture-backed founders who have the standard setup, only 20% will still be CEO even 3 years after an IPO. Wow. So statistically speaking, you may be in the 20%. Sometimes people get lucky and it works out. But odds are you're in the 80%. So you need to take this serious. You need to put the protections in as soon as you can. It's that old proverb about when's the best time to plant a tree? 40 years ago. The next best time is today. So if you get on it, if you take it seriously, if you anticipate, if you learn, you can protect yourself and protect your company's mission from these forces. It can be done, but it requires vigilance and it requires a willingness to do it. In the same way that, like, if you meet an elite athlete, and I think I see this all the time, like people don't realize, and you meet a successful business person, like a really high-end leader, they're like the Olympic athletes of business. Yeah. They've had an exceptionally rare experience and they're really extraordinary people. Like you have to be to get to that level in some way. But imagine you went to an Olympic athlete and you said, okay, I want to become strong and powerful and great athlete just like you. And so what's the secret? And they're like, well, to start, you got to eat right. You got to hit the gym. You got to be healthy. Right. And you're like, okay, got it. So later, after I'm already super successful, then I need to eat right. And you're like, no, man. You got to start right now. It's like, well, I already ate wrong yesterday. Is it too late for me? Well, it doesn't help, but like you can go to the gym today. You can start today. You don't have to wait to some, and we treat business like so differently than we do other domains where it's really obvious that you have to work at your craft. You have to cultivate health and strength and agility and whatever else you want for later. You need to work on it starting right now. So That's really the biggest lesson. If you think about the book, it's full of techniques. Like here are all the specific, I call it the blueprint for what you
Mhm.
need to do if you want to build an incorruptible organization. But the most important question in the whole book is not which techniques to use, but rather when they should be used.
Hmm.
And it's always too early until it's too late. Don't let that happen to you.
Is there one, obviously you want people to read the book and get all the techniques, but is there one, being the Just Get Started podcast, like, hey, go take an action today?
Yeah.
Anything you encourage
Okay.
people to think?
Yeah. I'll give you the very, very easiest one in the whole book. Okay.
Perfect.
If you're a founder, for founders, or if you're even in an organization already, then your organization has what's called a corporate charter. Okay. Corporate charters
Mhm.
are a matter of public record. Now, if you're the founder, you signed it. So it's in your inbox. Have you ever read it? I bet you haven't. Go read it. What you will do when you read it, you will find out that your lawyers helped you create a Delaware C Corp. And in order to do that, you had to file this document with the Delaware Chancery Court in which you said what the purpose of your company is. Most people think the word purpose, like corporate purpose, is some ESG BS like thing, like vague. No, purpose is a very specific legal thing that you must maximize for. Okay. Every corporation has a purpose, whether you know it or not. And if you don't know what yours is, legally speaking, you're in trouble. Okay. You're already in big trouble. So go read. Now, when you go read your document, here's what it's going to say. I can already tell you. It's going to say the Acme Corporation is hereby incorporated to pursue, and there'll be like a blank line where you fill in the blank, like a Mad Lib, and it will say any lawful act or activity. And you're going to be like, oh, sweet. I'm fine. It's open ended. I can do whatever I want. Wrong. You don't understand. In the era of shareholder primacy, we now interpret any lawful act or activity as meaning maximize shareholder value. So
Hmm.
you might be telling your team and the world, we've got a purpose. We have a mission. We're a mission driven company. Oh yeah, we make widgets. We believe in quality. No, you don't. That's just your mission statement. The actual purpose of the company is to maximize shareholder returns. And that means if any day some company shows up or some investor shows up and says, listen, I want to buy this company from you for $1 more per share than it's worth, you have to sell it to them, no matter what they intend to do with it. You're going to be
Hmm.
like Saul Price, watching from the outside in while somebody else decides what happens to your customers, your product, your mission. Okay.
Hmm.
So this might sound like a huge and difficult problem to fix, but it actually is super easy. Barely even an inconvenience, as the meme goes. Okay. All you have to do is call your lawyer, tell him you want to do what's called a public benefit corp filing, a PBC filing in Delaware. It is a 2-page legal filing. It is by far the easiest thing in the whole book. Your lawyer can have this prepared for you by tomorrow. You could file it the same day. All it does is write into your corporate charter what the public benefit is that your company exists to pursue. And if you already have a mission statement, easy, just now you have a chance to put it in your legal charter. If you don't have a mission statement, this will be your opportunity to develop one. And of course, I walk through exactly how and why you should do this in the book, but that's just one like incredibly easy thing. Now, if you're not the founder, if you're not the CEO, if you just work in an organization, you might say, well, I don't have the power to change that. It's true. But here's what you can do. Let's say you go in for a job interview or a performance review or any kind of meeting with a boss, some senior person. At the end of the meeting, when they say to you, hey, do you have any other questions? It's funny, someone asked me for advice about how to do this. And they said, and when they were asking for advice, they said, with the caveat that I don't have any courage. Okay, so you got to give me suggestions of things I can do that require no courage. It was like, I felt like I was being asked for like a no bake cookie recipe. It was like, okay, no courage required. Okay, all you have to do. Any further questions? Yeah. You just ask, is this a mission driven company? Just ask. They're going to say yes. They're going to say no. Of course, they're going to say yes.
Yeah.
Great. You're like, cool. How do you know? And they're going to be like, oh, we do all this good stuff for the community and we coach our softball team and we have free beer on Fridays or whatever. I don't know what they're going to say. Whatever they say, you'd be like, cool. That's amazing. Is that in the corporate charter? Just ask. You heard that was a thing. Now, first of all, this is a legit question, you need to know the answer to this. If it's not, you're being lied to. That's not the mission.
Hmm.
So one day when you turn out to be expendable, you'll be the one who's expended. I just talked to someone the other day, worked at a really mission-driven company for many years and then got brutally laid off when the company turned out to have no principles at all. And she said, I felt like I wasn't just drinking the Kool-Aid, I was serving the Kool-Aid.
Hmm.
If you don't want that to be you someday, then you deserve to know what the company's actual mission is. Anyway, the reason to ask this question, though, is not so much that you need to get the answer to it. Because remember, public charters are a matter of public record. Just call a friend of yours who's a lawyer and say, how do I pull my company's charter from Delaware? They'll tell you how to do it.
Yeah.
The reason it's important is maybe the person's going to say, gosh, I don't know. Maybe they'll ask their boss and she'll ask her boss.
Mm-hmm.
I've been in the room when this gets discussed at board meetings. CEO will be like, look, we're getting this question from candidates about whether we've done this thing. I think we better do it just so we can have a good answer. Like, you've now, just by that tiny little act, you've put a little drop in the water. Who knows what ripples you might cause. And what if two people asked? Right? What if someone else, like every person that asks, you're creating a little bit more of that gravitational pressure towards doing the right thing.
Yeah. I think that's great. I mean, that's a great first step. I've never even thought of that. Eric, it's a lot of fun, man. I guess last quick question for you here. I'm gonna let you go. Is there anything you left out of the book that you had to leave, unfortunately, because
So much. Oh my God.
is there
Yeah.
anything you mention as a quick aside?
Oh God, where do I even start? I mean, first of all, there's a secret chapter which is available at incorruptible.co for those that pre-order. So if you want to check it out,
Okay.
go to the website and you'll get to read some of the stuff that got cut, because there was a lot of details and implementation stuff, especially, that got cut. But I'll tell you one of my very favorite parts of the book that I had to cut. It really hurt me deeply to have to cut this. I had a section called Management Without Managers, which is really the era we're about to enter into. Like, it is now possible more than ever before to build self-organizing companies where we don't need professional managers doing the old traditional management task. And we've been experimenting with this. I mentioned the company Answer AI, the same company that makes Solve. Now, this is not a big company. We only have, roughly 12 employees at any one time. But that's partly because we're using our research in the power of large language models and AI to make each person hyper productive. And so I walk through the kind of the techniques we've used to create cultural coherence and strategy alignment without actually having any professional managers. And I think that part is super interesting, although it felt like it was too far afield. We had a lot of test readers of the book and people just felt like they couldn't. It was like for a lot of people, it was too much. There's already so much in the book. It was like one extra thing. And I felt, okay, we gotta cut it. But I did bring it back as part of the secret chapter. So people can check that out if they're interested.
Oh, that's awesome. Cool. Well, awesome, man. Where can people find you online? Where are you spending most of your time on LinkedIn, or do you have?
Yeah. Very easy to find on LinkedIn and of course on other social platforms too. Although I don't personally spend a lot of time on social media, I do make sure that when I'm doing something people want to know about, they can follow. The best way to follow me and to get in touch is to join my mailing list, which you can do at incorruptible.co. That's also where you can pre-order the book. We have links to all the independent bookstores, like local independent bookstores that are carrying the book, not just the big major retailers, but however you want to buy the book is, of course, fine with me. It's going to be available in hardcover, in ebook, and in audiobook. I personally narrated the audiobook, for better or for worse. So if you like the sound of my voice, then you can go for that format. And if after listening to this, you're like, I really don't, then maybe the hardcover is better for you. Either way, a lot of cool bonus content and special stuff we've tried to create for those that decide to join the email list. So please do check that out.
Eric, thanks so much, man. A good, 3.5-year journey, I guess, to get to this point. So congrats on the launch here. And I appreciate you coming on and sharing.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for a great conversation.